Hello, everyone, and welcome to Davide Pagnotta, who's CEO and founder of Wires Humanity. Now, David, we know that bad interpersonal relationships can ruin a company. Do you want to give us your history as to how you've come to be in this role that you're in now?
Dan, thank you for having me, and welcome everyone from me as well. I'm sure we all are very familiar with going to work and having frictions with other people, not understanding each other, or emotion, not knowing how to handle our emotions or everybody else's emotions. And it's a common feeling that, the individuals, if you think about all the individuals in a team, they have like amazing skills and knowledge. But then as a team, we don't necessarily gel well, and not, all our potential doesn't come out as a team. And sometimes it can be catastrophic on the opposite side. And I come from an experience where, because the culture was that, you wouldn't admit mistakes, you wouldn't ask for help, because it was seen as something people would play against you. So it happens that we had a big project going on that was draining loads of cash, and the project owners kept it hidden because that was the culture of the company, and until it was too late and it bankrupted the company.
Goodness. So in terms of the factors that led to that, I mean, what is it that led to that? Because you've got people who are very competent in their roles, but there's something missing in terms of that interpersonal trust sometimes, which leads people into that. They'd rather sweep something under the carpet than address an issue. What was missing in your view in terms of how that team dynamic was functioning?
Look, a profound belief that I have, and that got confirmed over the years in my work, in my experience, both as in corporations, as a leadership training and coach. We show up depending on the system around us. So I may be the same. I am the same person, whether I'm talking with you, with my team, or at home. I'm the same person with the same set of values, the same beliefs, etc. But depending on the environment where I find myself, I will act differently. So it's easy to say, these people, the owner of this project, made a mistake. It's easy to say that, and blame them. But that's a symptom. And we too easily blame people based on the symptoms. The cause was the company culture, and the company culture is made of many elements and time, and obviously the example that the leaders give. In that particular case, yes, we had a CEO that was very kind of a bully, and therefore that was the culture that we inherited. And of course, we each one of us has. They decide how they behave. Of course, I'm responsible for my behavior, but the climate around me, the environment around me, the culture around me does have an impact on the decisions that I will make about my behavior. So, what was the element missing there? It was, if I'm thinking from a company perspective, the bit that was missing was someone insisting on HR to do something about it. I mean, if you think of how the process works in a company, it's not, if I feel like the team culture is not working well, and it's actually potentially causing mistakes and problems, the processes say that I should talk to HR. But then, of course, HR there's always the political games as well. The CEO himself could be a person with a lot of skills, a lot of great network, and you don't want to lose them, even if their character or their leadership style is not the best. So there's a lot of components, and there are many areas where we can do something about it. So I wouldn't say there was one thing missing, but yeah, all of us, even me, all of us had a role, and I could have spoken up earlier, of course. Yes.
So you're in the situation where presumably you've got some really highly qualified people. And I feel sometimes like in organizations, what happens is you have people who are very qualified, very experienced in certain technical things. And we just get thrown together into an organization told like, get on with it. I guess it's a bit like trying to make a good food recipe. You get good ingredients and then just leave it on the kitchen table, and no one actually mixes it together. And I think it's probably unfair of us to sort of expect HR to fix those problems. Inherently, my belief is that HR is there to provide individual resources to fill roles. And then there's also an element of protecting the company from the people. It's a callous thing to say sometimes. But I think those interpersonal dynamics, it's a really big missing element of what moves an organization from being an ordinary average organization to being one which is really high performing. So you've formed this organization, Wise Humanity, which is part of that to bring those people together, to be that chef almost. Can I say that? Is that a fair estimate? Mix ingredients together. How do you bring out the best in individuals, and how do you get people who are individually brilliant, but to be a high performing team? What is it how do you do that?
The typical corporate culture, and this applies to both large companies and small companies, it is changing, okay, but the typical one is based on processes, and of course processes are important, and in the years these processes have also become even more detailed. There's less left to improvisation, or just, like, oh yeah, they will figure it out. In some companies you can still have a bit of that, but the tendency has been for many years to really define processes in a very detailed way, which is fine. But I don't think it's enough, and it shows that it's not enough, because there's a element that you say now, like, how do I um how do I give bad news, for example. Nobody wants to give bad news. Or how do I give bad feedback? Or even how do I speak up? Imagine you're in a team meeting, and someone has a great idea, everybody's excited about it, and you have some doubts based on your experience. So actually your skills, and that's the reason why you were hired, to share those skills and your experience and your opinion. Still, everybody, yeah, you don't want to be the party pooper, and you find it difficult to speak up, or you don't speak up at all. And then, of course, that has consequences. So what we do, well, the story was that, for 20 years I worked for corporations. I'm a physicist originally. I worked for large engineering companies. I led large teams with people from different cultures as well. At one point I was leading 45 people in 19 different countries. And at the same time, to be a better leader, I took many leadership programs myself. I took a coaching diploma, and then the catastrophe of that I told you before, the last company I worked for went bankrupt because of the culture. And at that point, my interest was more about people. My interest was more about creating workplaces where people are happy to be and flourish, and of course interact well together. And at that point, then I started doing what I do today, which is helping teams, helping companies develop the emotional skills. We can talk about emotional intelligence. We can talk about coaching. We can talk about neuroscience, and the emotional skills that help them, go beyond what is written in the process, and create an environment that works both for the individual, the team, and the company.
You mentioned a happy workplace. I mean, that's almost, I think a lot of people listening to this might think like, what is that? What does a happy workplace look like? And we also have bosses who might think like, what does a happy workplace mean that people are more productive?
Look, there is science around it that showing that more engaged teams, where their well-being is looked after, they are also more productive. One of the things where we excel at Wise Humanity, and maybe that's because I'm a physicist originally, but we love measuring everything. So when we start working with a company, at the beginning, we do some audits of how the current team dynamics, and we create a baseline, and then we measure how they improve working with us in time, because of course culture takes time.
What's a typical thing you'd measure? What would be an example?
So all our methodology is about creating different behaviors. Depending who we're talking with, we call them rituals or micro habits or micro practices, and they are about how people talk together, how we handle communication, how we handle decisions, what process, how we handle consensus. Consensus typically is something that people look for. And we have so much data about consensus not being a good way to make decisions. So, because it means that someone didn't speak up, basically. So how many decisions with consensus you had that where you actually manufacture dissent, to make sure that you were challenging the decision, even if nobody was challenging it. For example, this is one of the behaviors that when we work with companies, then they start using a manufacturing dissent, which is not really, it's actually not manufacturing. What you're really manufacturing is the opportunity for everyone to speak up, really, without the awkwardness of speaking up. And
Yeah.
then we measure how those behaviors are being actually put into place and used. And then we measure the speed of the decision making, the number of mistakes that were discussed openly, and things like that. Yes, and it
So
does show that micro habits and being focused on practical advice really pays back.
that's got a big bearing on the emotional maturity of the people in the room, because presumably people sometimes don't want to be challenged. They see it as a challenge to their leadership if someone has a dissenting view. And I think it was Jeff Bezos who mentioned about the teams within Amazon, where they measured the ones that were most productive were the ones that there was the most dissent in. And it's dissent is maybe, I don't know if that's the right word, but it was where people felt confident to voice an opposing view. And that then gives that diversity of thought an opportunity for discussion. How do you create the situation or the environment in which someone feels comfortable to share a dissenting view?
Look, this is the same way also that when we work also with individual leaders, and it's really all about the practical change. You may know, like for example, again, speaking up.
Mm.
We all know that it's important, so we all know the theory, and the change comes from applying it, from making it happen. Otherwise it's not change. I can go to a leadership program, they tell me how to give feedback or how to give bad news, and how to handle mistakes when other people make them. And then I go back to the office, but I don't do it. Okay, yeah, I know the theory, but if I don't put it into practice, there's no change happening. So we focus on that. Whenever we go into a company, we first do an assessment and understand what are the key dynamics that could benefit from some improvement. And then we talk about the theory behind, the emotional theory, the neuroscience behind a different behavior.
Mhm.
And then together with the team, we facilitate the decision of what is one practice or two practices that they want to change. In a team meeting, for example, I'm not going to say we don't have the expectation to change, to change the emotional tone of a team meeting or to change the culture in one day. But if we all agree that there's a different behavior and that will be implemented at the team meetings, and we measure how many times it's done, and we keep track of that, and then everybody is more invited to do it, and then the behavior then changes the culture. If, like for example, if I decide, so one team that we work for, an executive team of a cryptocurrency company, and they actually had a problem of consensus. They were too kind. They were too polite with each other, too respectful with each other, and they wouldn't challenge each other. And then one of the decisions that they made was that consensus was not an acceptable. If a decision was made out of consensus, it was not a decision. So they would create the opportunity to manufacture dissent. And then you can do it in many ways. Like, for example,
Mm.
everybody has to say something, has to share a dissenting view or a concern. Or I don't know if you ever heard of, there's a ritual called a pre-mortem. And you make it
Pre-mortem.
pre-mortem,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
You make a decision in your team. This I really recommend to everyone. It's easy to implement as well. You make a decision with your team, and then you imagine, okay, let's think we are 3 months from today, and the decision turned out to be a mistake. What went wrong? And everybody needs to say something based on, I'm more product, and I'll tell you what could have gone wrong from the product point of view. I'm more operations. What went wrong from the operations point of view? And so you're manufacturing a way to make sure that dissent emerges, if there is any, and also to make sure that there might be problems or risks that you didn't think about. And in startups, it's also so simple. So it happens so many times because there's few of us. We're all normally very engaged and emotionally invested when we like nice ideas, and we make decisions based on momentum and passion. And we don't necessarily give enough thought to, let's sit for a second before we make the decision. Think, okay, what could go wrong? And So pre-mortem is a simple ritual that makes your decisions stronger and makes sure that everybody speaks up.
I love that because it's an active risk assessment, effectively, isn't it, of where things could go
Yes.
wrong.
And then the culture changes, by the way. The more you use this
Mm.
tool, then the culture inside the team changes. And because everybody gets used to thinking, but what could go wrong and what can we do today to avoid that risk?
Of that because if we look at almost every innovation in rail safety or air traffic safety, almost every single one of those are based on some catastrophe that's occurred and some number of people that have died. And you kind of think there must be a better way to do that. I mean, pre-mortem, it's far more palatable than post-mortem, isn't it?
It's funny that you mention airplanes and airports, because recently I was running like a free workshop, and one of the topics that we talked about was exactly this pre-mortem, and a person in the attendees shared that
Mm.
they actually use it even deeper than the tool, that the simple tool I've shared, but they use this pre-mortem mentality for all their decisions, etc. And she didn't say what company she was working for. And then I said, well, this sounds a lot like, I just said, this sounds a lot like something you would do for, for an airplane safety. And in fact, she was working for an airport.
Very good. Yeah. I wanted to go back to the framework for which people make decisions, because you mentioned earlier about processes and the fact that processes very often restrict people from making decisions. And we also have the additional dynamic within that about the company culture and what becomes company and corporate doctrine. The framework for which people make decisions in, there must be some sort of purpose to the organization. So how important is that? If people understand what the vision of the organization is, what's the mission of the organization? Because that must surely drive some sort of direction by which people either write a process or make a decision. How does that fit within what you do?
It fits in the sense that vision and mission values are very important, like lighthouses, right? They show the direction, and the bit that is often missing is how do we translate that into behaviors? Okay, fine. Revenue target. Yeah, everybody knows what our revenue targets are for the 2026. How do we put it in place practically? So the revenue target itself by itself is not absolutely necessary, but it's not sufficient to say, okay, what decisions we're going to make. And then also then you go down to values. Are we willing to cut corners to close some sales? How much, or even if we don't go against the law, obviously let's not consider the option, but even staying within the law, how much importance are we giving to sustainability of our choices? How much or environmental impact or diversity of our choices? And so the vision and the targets and the values, everything is important, but then you need to decide, okay, but in practice, what does this mean? That's the bit that processes rarely manage to codify, and that's where the company culture, the real culture that is made not by the stated values, by the real behaviors. That is what really matters, and it becomes kind of the unwritten law. This is how we work in this company. I work with companies where they had like 25% employee turnover. 25% is a lot. The average across good and bad companies is 13. So 25 is a lot. And even people who would talk to us that you would expect, and that would you expect like they're self-aware and emotionally evolved if they're calling us too. So even the people, the champions from this company that were talking to us, they were defending that. They were defending that because it means that the people who stayed were really right for the company.
Or desperate?
No, but I'm thinking, if I were in that company, I would probably end up thinking that way as well, because that's the norm, and then we adapt to it, and because otherwise we either leave or have a very bad time at work every day, and so we do adapt, and the system around us has an impact on my behaviors and my thoughts, and it can change me. Even if I'm the same person and in a different environment, I would defend different ideas.
In creating a cohesive team, how do we take disparate personalities? Because there is a train of thought, but there's almost like the two opposing trains of thought. One is you need to recruit people that are quite similar because that means the team works well together. And then the opposing view is that the more diverse thinking you've got in there, the more dynamic the team is and the more opportunity there is for new ideas. However, the more opportunity there is also for dissent. So what's the sweet spot in there? And how does someone go about creating a team? What's the best mix of team, I guess, is the question.
If I could give one piece of advice, just one, because obviously there are many elements and that this reality is always more complex. But the first piece of advice I would give is look for people with low ego, with small ego, because the problem with ego is that we get really attached to our own ideas and our own thoughts, our own opinions. And if someone challenges my opinion, because I have a big ego, then what I feel is that that it's not my opinion that is threatened and challenged, it's me. And of course, I will react as if someone were trying to attack me with a knife or something, to hurt me physically and not only emotionally, because I'm attaching myself, my worth to my own ideas. So if someone challenges my ideas, they're challenging me as a person, as a leader, as a professional. And then I become very defensive and I close up because I need to defend myself. And of course, my defensive reaction can be attack or not, but it's always pulling up walls to defend myself. And then the diversity of ideas, it's difficult to manage it in that situation.
How do you spot someone with low ego or sort of a bad ego? I mean, that's really difficult to see on a CV or if someone's sat in front of you because they're always presenting their best picture. So would you put them in some sort of dynamic where they're challenged maybe and you see how they respond?
So one thing I always do is ask people to tell me stories. And then based on the stories, I make my own judgment about their ego. It's really easy to see when the ego is in action in a team. It's a lot easier than of course, in a one-to-one job interview where everybody's always showing their best behavior. But in a team, it's a lot easier. So it's one of the things that we always measure when we do an assessment of a team, the health of a team's dynamics. We always measure you can spot it in what is in the team, what is the level of fear of challenging ideas? What is the level of openness to challenging ideas? So you can ask people, so how regularly do you challenge each other? And, in a anonymous survey, those questions get answered honestly. Then you see.
That'll give you a picture of the team dynamics,
Yes.
what the individuals are like. Yeah. So I have my anecdotal view on people with big egos is that there's some element of insufficiency or lack of self-confidence that they have, which is a compensatory mechanism. I have no idea if that's rooted in science, but it's my firmly held belief, which you're welcome to challenge and I won't take offense at. But how does someone who's in that situation, so typically often they end up being a leader of a group and that almost exacerbates the situation. How do you work with someone like that? Because obviously we can't go and fire everyone who's got a high ego. Sometimes you want to address that and there might be very often a really good human underneath that sort of layer of behavioral malpractice. How do you work with them to say, this is a safe space, this is how you deal with challenge? There must be some sort of tools that we can hopefully give and maybe a pathway that we can take people on and say, we'll move you from being this person over the course of time, maybe days or weeks, to being into a place where you have a team that feel comfortable challenging you and you don't feel threatened by that because it's not about you, it's about this mission that we have in an organization. What's the journey that you could take someone on with that?
Okay, there's two journeys here. One is for the individual, and that is definitely a coaching. It could be also therapy, depending on how deep certain wounds are. But there's definitely a journey for the individual, and it starts with them acknowledging the problem and wanting to do something about it. And there's a journey for the team. A metaphor that we use a lot, and was you mind when we talk about ego, is the ego bubble. So imagine, this is true for everyone. This conversation that you and I are having is not really between you and me. It's between the role that you're playing in this moment and the role that I'm playing with this moment in this moment. So it's like the mask that you want to
Mhm.
show me now and the mask that I want to show you now. So it's actually between the two of them. It's not like my profound deep me and your profound deep you. And of course, the more we are authentic people, the closer this mask is to my authentic me. Always an element of, I'm behaving as someone who's as a guest in a podcast. So there's always an element of role that we play. So the ego bubble is basically your ego bubble now talking to my ego bubble. And this is the facade and the mask or the walls that we build around us to feel safe. Everything I put inside my ego bubble is something that if you touch it, then you're actually touching me. So if I have a big ego, my bubble is big because there's a lot of stuff inside my ego bubble. So all my opinions, all my beliefs, my idea of what other people think of me is all inside my ego bubble. And the bigger ego I have, the more stuff I put inside the ego bubble. And the bigger the ego bubble becomes, the easier it actually is to hurt me.
Because the more sensitive it is.
And it's a bigger target. So as you were saying, that the people with big ego there's a level of insecurities or fear, and it's easy to hurt them. So if you're a person with a big ego, you're actually not going through life in a very happy way, because there are so many things that you need to be careful about, because you're going around with this big ego bubble. One thing that where the journey, for example, when we work with individuals with big egos, the journey starts from showing them that the more attached they are to their ideas and their beliefs or their strategies, their vision, w- the w- the worst service they're doing to that idea. Now, imagine that you and I are two executives of a company, and I have a certain vision. You have a different one. You challenge me. Now, if I have a big ego, then I will feel personally threatened, up to saying, "Oh, my role as a leader in this company is threatened. My worth as an individual is threatened." And from that moment on, all my conversation with you will not be about defending my vision because I believe in it. It will be about protecting myself, my idea of leadership, my idea of self-worth, etc.
And that's when
So
arguments get personal and out of hand.
yes, and then I'm really not doing a good service to my vision. So this is an important uh, realization, that because we always say, yeah, you need to have passion for your ideas. Absolutely. But
Mm.
it is one thing to defend them with passion, and it is another to have a big ego and then identify myself and my self-worth with that idea.
How much does imposter syndrome contribute to that inflation of the ego?
So, well, they can be very connected or not. It can be, so imposter syndrome can be one of the reasons why I then develop a big ego, because I need to defend myself. But it's not necessarily connected to ego. You can imposter syndrome. There's so many things that cause it. Well, and then everything goes back to our early experiences of success or threat or fear, and as kids, all the experiments that we do in the world to see how to handle difficult situations, and then we learn a certain habit, a certain narrative, and then we develop that for the rest of our lives until we decide to do some coaching or some therapy, and then we can change. But
Yeah.
so imposter syndrome, by the way, is natural. Is natural
Mm.
because we are doing something that is outside our comfort zone and we're not familiar with, and then we feel like, okay, I've never done it. But if I have this role, this job title, then I'm supposed to know what I'm doing, and so there's this paradox where I'm in a role for the skills I have, but I don't have the experience yet. And it never ends anyway. Even if I'm
Mm.
in that role for 10 years, I can still find reasons to think. I can still find questions that I don't have an answer for. And then I feel like, oh, if I don't have an answer for this, I'm an imposter then. I create a narrative of what that role should look like, Like, like the CEO of a company, or like you're a founder. Oh my God, this is actually also very close to us. You're a founder, and then you create this image in your head of what a founder should look like. And if you and of course you create this image by picking the best of everyone around you. So the founder that you would like to be, or actually that you should be, a great networker, has lots of ideas, is a team leader and brings everybody with them. Doesn't fear, that is never afraid to ask for or to have a sales conversation or a fundraising conversation, and always has energy, sleeps 8 hours a day. So you have this idea, and of course, I'm not there, you're not there, we're not there. And then you start feeling, instead of looking at it as like, like, yeah, one day I want to become that person, but it's okay if I'm not there yet. We start thinking, oh, I'm not a good founder because I'm
Hmm.
not that profile. But that profile doesn't exist.
Is it a question of people who judge themselves by someone else's inauthentic picture? Because the picture that someone gets of someone else is the polished Instagram version where you see all the perfections. And then we base our imposter syndrome on someone else's imperfect but perfectly positioned framework. You judge yourself against that and you think like, well, I don't measure up to that, without seeing the failures that they don't choose to share.
Look, this is definitely true, and it's even more exacerbated by today's social media, and not only Instagram or TikTok, but even LinkedIn. It's like that. Very few people share failures or fears or weaknesses on LinkedIn. I would say though that sometimes it's okay to compare. Sometimes we still comparing ourselves to someone who a successful person who rightly shows a trait of their character that we would like to have, or an achievement that we would like to be able to achieve one day. And it's always, it's always okay to compare ourselves to others, as long as that inspires us. So if seeing
That's the thing.
if seeing someone's success inspire me, that's amazing. If it
Mm.
gives me strength, if it gives me more energy, if it has a positive impact, that's fine, absolutely fine. The moment I start comparing myself and instead I focus on what I miss, what I lack, or the fact that I'm not there yet, then has actually a negative impact on me. So that comparison is not helping me. And there's an important element that we always know, theoretically we all know, but then in practice we don't use that knowledge. We all start from different places, and this story of the self-made man is a myth, and it has created lots of insecurities in the world. There's no person is an island. Nobody became successful by themselves, starting from zero. Nobody starts from zero, and someone starts from, even if you created a very successful company starting from a garage, someone gave you that garage. Someone gave you the education that you used to, to code the very first Mac. Someone gave you the availability of your time to do that. Many people don't have the luxury of time to spend in a garage, and their life will be different. So we all start from different places, and we all grow up in the different systems that allow or don't allow certain things. So it's good to compare ourselves to others as long as it's an inspiration. The moment
So
it makes me focus on my fears, my lack, my insecurities, my failures, then it's not helping me. And I should remind myself that, again, we all start from different places. So the only person I should compare myself to is me yesterday, or
that's
me a
a good
year ago.
framework. I think so that the mindset by which people attach to them, or the mindset by which people go into a challenge is important. Because, for example, I could go into a gym and think, I'm a fat middle-aged bloke. What am I doing here? Or I can go in there saying I'm a fat middle-aged bloke in a gym. This is exactly where I should be. And these are the people that I want to be like. I think people can adopt, and sometimes consciously, I think, the mindset that they have. Because I think that, as you mentioned, there's a positive element to an imposter syndrome. I think Stephen Bartlett mentioned that once in one of those groups where, you You grow in the area where you feel that you're uncomfortable with. You grow in your discomfort zone. So if you're comfortable, it's unlikely that you're going to be stretched in any way that you're going to be growing. You mentioned also, so perfect is the enemy of the good, or perfect is the enemy of the great. That's a big thing where people compare themselves to that sort of perfection. And it's almost much more authentic as a human for us to accept our failures and our inadequacies. And that, coming back to the situation in a meeting room where someone gets challenged, how do you equip someone to be comfortable with being challenged and maybe coming face to face with, say, for example, a decision that they've made which isn't in the best interest and someone else has got a better idea? How do you equip them to be able to deal with that in a mature and grown-up way and to accept that someone else, possibly even a junior person or someone who they presume is that they're better than, has in fact got better ideas than them?
Let's see how you react to what I'm going to say. Again, we have this unwritten rule, and that is true for many of us, that I'm a successful manager or whatever employee, the more people will agree with my ideas, or the more the team will decide to go with my proposal, then the more valuable I am and the better employee I am. But this narrative makes me think that whenever people disagree with my ideas, then I'm not good enough. So what if we change the narrative, and instead of my objective in a meeting is not for the team to embrace my ideas. My objective in the meeting is to make sure we challenge all the ideas that come up. That's it. To actually provide, I go into a meeting with an idea, but the objective of the meeting is to challenge everybody's ideas, including mine. That's the objective. So that we come out of that meeting with something robust. So we need to change the value system and the narrative, that the value that we attached to certain events. Or like the other one is having the answers. How many times we feel like we're wrong or we're not good enough because we didn't have an answer. And again, this is of course it's fine. It's absolutely fine to want to have the answer. It's not fine to then say, if I don't have the answer, then I'm not good enough. And this, by the way, creates a lot of problems in a company, because if you're a leader and you think that you need to have all the answers, then you're actually a very bad team player, because you will not engage the team to get the best opinion or the best decision, because you know that you should have the answer. So you need to provide the decision. So A, you're not a great team player. B, you're putting so much stress on yourself. So in that case, for example, a different mindset is, I don't need to have all the answers. I just need to make sure I ask all the questions.
I think then there's an antiquated view with management where, and maybe it's, based in sort of old feudal systems where the manager's at the top and they control everything. And really what I've seen in my observations is a really good team manager is almost like you're there to provide the foundation. You're there to create the scenario or the ambience within a room where people can feel confident to say stuff. And when I've had the privilege of leading people that were in specific disciplines far better at it than what I am. And what's helped us in that situation is to say, this is the objective for this team. I'm not here to serve my purposes. And I've said to people, if I'm wrong on something, please tell me. This is not about me having an ego stroke. This is about the team making the correct decision, so that we as a team can serve the department or the company or construction project, as it were, that we were working on. And that does two things. So one, I feel like it frees me from the obligation to be right all the time. And secondly, it gives people the confidence to be able to voice something. Now, I think very often people don't have that framework. As a manager, you get put into this position. You have all these complexities of people looking up to you. You feel all this imposter syndrome, and then you feel like you have to control everything. But is it as simple as saying to people, it's not about you, don't make it about you, make it about the team? That seems to be a simple switch, but I don't know if is that too simplistic to approach?
No, ultimately, I think that's very fair. But of course, The point is, okay, what internal challenges, so what or internal changes do I need to make to
Mm.
become that person? So where am I coming from? Am I coming from a fear of speaking up because I feel like I should have all the right answers and then I don't speak up? Or do I come from a need to be liked and then I always agree with everybody's opinions and I don't share mine? Or am I coming from a big ego where my only way to feel safe is when everybody agrees with what I say? So the journey, the internal journey that everybody needs to make is different. But yes, ultimately, the point is about putting the team and the team's decisions as the focus and the objective, not me and my personal opinions.
That's a big framework to take, though, because I think that does a number of things. If we can clearly articulate what the team's purpose is, or the company, or division, or project, or whatever it is, because that does a few things. One is it frames people's mindset. And I had a previous boss who talked about that as being a reference point for decision making. If you've got that point set where you go, that's our purpose, it does a few things. It gets people thinking about how does a procedure or decision or something like that serve the outcome of that purpose. But it also removes the subjectivity or the feeling that the leader's got to be right. It's not someone making a counter proposal to what I've said, which challenges me. It's how does this best serve the objective vision, which is separate from each of us as individuals. And I feel like that's also another easy step that people can take. It's just let's articulate the vision and always keep that front and center to what we do. Do you cover that as well in your meetings?
Yeah, the reason I was smiling is that because one of the questions of our team dynamics assessment is exactly how clearly how is the vision for your team to you. Yeah, rarely is a strong answer.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's true. We have a lot of clarity on our role as an individual, but often as a team, the company or the team leader or the team doesn't spend enough time clarifying, okay, what is the objective of the team? What is the purpose of the vision for the team? And yeah, and that's something that, yes, we do address and we help with that.
Why do teams not address their purpose? Isn't that fundamental to their existence?
How many companies have you met or worked for that understand that the core value creation element of a company is the team and not the individual? And
Very few.
yeah, very
Mm.
few. And it changes the way HR is built. Is what changes the way the culture is built in that company. But it's a fundamental change to think that we still have, even in good companies, you hire individuals and you try to do all the assessment necessary to understand beforehand if they are a good fit also culturally. And it's absolutely fine to do it. Um, but even in those companies, there's still a lot of focus on the individual and not on the team as a unit and as an entity. That changes the way you do many things. You do training or you solve problems. My typical example here is how you handle a mistake as a team, not as a mistake made by an individual, because the typical reaction is always to find the individual, find and blame the individual, and not think, okay, if someone made a mistake, nobody wants to make a mistake willingly. Nobody
Mm.
wants to make a mistake. So if they did something wrong, by the way, you only learn it's wrong later. The moment you make a decision, in that moment, you're making the best decision that you can in that moment with the information that you have in the moment or the pressure that you're under in the moment, anything, whatever the system is, whatever the environment is. But in that moment, you're always making the best decision you can. And then it proves to be a mistake. Okay, then the point is, okay, what allowed the mistake to happen? What pressures or what other things were on your plate that you pressed the button at the wrong time and you didn't double check? So it's always the system that you need. It's always the system that you need to look at. So even if someone makes a mistake, you need to handle it from the system perspective, not the individual. And also we this is also something we work a lot with companies. What are the behaviors that you need to have as a team to make sure that you're handling mistake as a team and not blaming an individual?
So talking about that, where we say that a mistake is an error of the system, not the individual, I feel like that sets a really strong precedent as well, because the next time a situation occurs, hopefully, and if the team has done the work, the leader boss, manager of the team has done their work properly, that individual will have better information, better analytics, a better framework in which to make that decision again. So hopefully they make that decision correctly. But secondly, I think they'll have the confidence to make that decision. And to me, a lot of issues, a big proportion, and I'm really open to information on this. A big issue in organizations is people not taking a decision because they're scared of an outcome, or they'd rather not be in the firing line, or they can give it off to someone else. So that precedent management, where a leader provides in a negative moment the support to give someone to be able to make that same decision in future with freedom, I think is really powerful. But it takes
Yes.
a grown-up manager to be able to do that.
It takes a grown-up manager to want to do it, and then it takes the whole team to do it. So the grown-up manager, I'm gonna be on the side of the grown-up managers now, because there's also an element that we always blaming the top a bit too much. So yes, we definitely need grown-up managers, absolutely, but nobody's a wizard, and so it also takes the team and a good manager that understands that there is not enough to give good instructions and give good example, and sometimes you really need to train the team to think differently and change behaviors, etc. But the team, everybody individually has a portion of responsibility. Even I always say, even in the case of of the company that went bankrupt that I was working for, we all knew what the culture was like, so we all could have done a bit more than what we actually did.
You mentioned responsibility, and you also have in your book, you have responsibility. What's the difference?
So there's many times, not always, but many times when we think of responsibility, then we immediately think of blame and guilt. And so I'm taking responsibility for something. That sentence alone is normally used when something went wrong. And then you say, okay, I take responsibility. Or you blame someone else and say, you should take responsibility. So there's always this blame culture inside. There's often this blame subtitle in the word responsibility. So we use a different, was humanity, we use a slightly different version of that word, response-ability, which is actually the original meaning of the word. Like, what is my ability to respond? So something is happening around me, and maybe it was my mistake. Again, the moment I made the decision of obviously didn't want to make a mistake, it turns out later that that decision caused something that I didn't want to happen. So I call it a mistake. All right. Something that I didn't want to see happen happened. What is my ability to respond to it? And this is what taking responsibility means. I take responsibility because I have an ability to respond. And you know what? Yes, something bad happened. I didn't want this to happen. It happened. What can I do now? And that's it. That's what where I should focus 100% of my intellectual and emotional energy. This has happened. What can I do now? What is my ability to respond? And that's the best way to handle a mistake. Like, okay, accepting that this happened and then focusing on the present. Okay, what can I do now?
What are things that a manager could do to give someone the ability to respond?
Well, one thing that is possibly over talked about now, but underacted upon, is creating environments that are psychologically safe.
Mm-hmm.
So for these things, for example, talking about micro habits, companies that we work with, sometimes then they create a Slack channel where they only share mistakes. And people, of course, at the beginning start safely, like, oh, I sent an email without the attachment, sent the wrong proposal, and that starts being a bit more a bigger mistake. Then you create an environment where people feel free to share mistakes. They're actually encouraged to do it every time they realize they've made one, and we all make mistakes. And then you cultivate a culture of psychological safety. Another one is, again, not blaming individuals. And whenever a mistake happens, then you look at the system that allowed it to happen and what we can change in the system so that the same mistake will not happen again.
It's a phenomenon in safety management. And I mean, it comes across in, I think, a lot of human dynamics, where if people are measured on a certain thing, that the way in which something is measured often drives a particular behavior. So, for example, in safety, and this is a very common thing in South Africa, to drive past a factory and there's a board up that says how many safe days an organization has had. And it looks like it's a really good thing, but the driver that happens there is that any incident, be it minor, learning opportunities, get swept under the carpet because the person doesn't want to be the one to say, I'm the one who stopped this fantastic safety record running. So all these learning opportunities get swept under the carpet until something happens, which you can't hide. And then management, of course, go, we had no idea. Where does this come from? Because all those learning opportunities got lost. I think it's a powerful thing that you've mentioned there. And also thinking about how does an organization incentivize or record or report certain behaviors, and what effect does it have on the people working in the organization?
Like in this case, for example, what we recommend, and again, it's something measurable, is how many mistakes have happened that have been recorded on which you've done a systemic analysis and made a change in the system, not the individual. Because it's, if I'm under pressure because I have, like, again, think of a startup, but there are many other environments where people are under pressure. There are so many things to do, so little time. And I might do something in haste and make a mistake. The example that I always have, I give it. I share a campaign and the link in the campaign is broken, and which actually happened to us. And I only realized a week later, just because there were so many other things to do, etc. And I didn't, and nobody was measuring the number of clicks on the campaign. And then this became what we changed. And then you can change, like you can say, okay, I can even automate it. If in the first 10 minutes I have a certain number of a rate of emails open, but a rate of clicks that is too low, I block the campaign. I block the campaign automatically because there's probably a mistake. It's a joke to say, yeah, the solution is making sure that I'm less under pressure. This will not happen. What can happen is that I can set up automated systems that can say, okay, you made a mistake again, but this time the system noticed and stopped it.
That's a Japanese quality technique that you've utilized there called poka-yoke. So the moment the system detects a defective product, it stops. So you don't keep on making a defective product. I love it. It's the first time I hear it applied in a digital sense.
And the next time someone still makes a mistake that doesn't get picked up quickly, that is an amazing opportunity to improve the system. And this is how a mistake should be treated. Like when we're developing an app now, when I tend to issue the new features earlier rather than later, and I tell people who are using it, please find the problems and let us know so we can fix them. I want you to find the problems because every feedback I receive is an opportunity to improve that I would miss otherwise.
You mentioned also in talking about work, we've spoken a lot about work. People talk about work-life balance and you talk about work-life harmony. What does work-life harmony mean?
So first of all, whenever we try to find balance, so this thing about balance is, in my opinion, is there's a risk in the narrative around balance, because the way we look at balance is always between two things that are in contrast. They are fighting against each other, and then we find the balance. So work-life balance, in a way, assumes that one is a bit against the other. And even if I'm lucky and I manage to find some healthy balance, by nature, it's a unstable balance because then there's an emergency on something, or family could be a family emergency. And then, of course, it disrupts work. And there could be a work emergency, and then it disrupts my personal life. So even if I try to find this balance, I'm not actually solving the problem beneath, which is I still see life and work in contrast. There are ways to find a purpose in your work that makes it in harmony with your life. And then it becomes easier to see your life holistically and see that work is one component of it, instead of seeing your life on one side and work on the other. Have you seen Severance? Have you heard of it, Severance, the series? It's basically these people who have a chip in their heads, and the moment they enter the office, they have no idea what their private life is about. And the same when they leave the office, it's the opposite. They have no idea what they're... Look, by the way, that works only because they have fixed times at work. So it really works. And in our life, we don't have that. We often take home with us. And or we often have, if we have problems in our personal life, we carry them over to work. But my point is, obviously, not everyone can have the privilege of having a job that is like the perfect working reincarnation of their values and their aspirations in life. It's a nice thing to say that we will all like what we would want to have that, but not everybody has the privilege to have that. And so even if you have like a boring job, we really recommend, and when we work with people, we do that, we help you find the meaning of that boring job in your life holistically. You have seen as a whole entity, and then find harmony. So once your job, even if it's boring, has a good role inside a holistic picture of who you are as a person, then it's easier to handle the times when they're not, when you have to work longer hours or whatever shit happens at work. But harmony should be what we're looking for, not balance, because again, balance, it means there's still two things competing against each other.
Very often, it doesn't matter what the work is, but that work empowers a lot of things in your personal life. For example, it gives meaning. It gives the ability for someone to have the life they lead. And if you have, wider family and children and so on, that, it empowers a whole lot of things beyond just the hours that you clock in. But I think for some people, and I feel like it's more and more people are getting this opportunity now to live their life's purpose through the work that they do. I know it's still a small proportion of people, but there are those people there. For example, I work with people who are very keen environmentalists, and they get to do that job as their day job, and they have very keen environmental passions. So if we can invoke Maslow's hierarchy for a bit, that self-actualization bit comes through in the work that someone does. And I agree with you. I think it shouldn't be seen as a conflict, but one is the enabler of the other.
Yes, actually, that's actually a very good way to look at it. One is the enabler of the other.
Moving forward in terms of thinking how a business owner would move from having an average organization, how would a business owner who has an average organization, a typical company, move to having one that is a high-performing team? What are things that they should be looking at within their team to be able to do? Firstly, I assume within themselves, and then as an organization.
The analogy that I use a lot in these situations is that of couples therapy. And you can think of a team as, an extended couple. It's very, very hard to have self-awareness as a team. So it's very hard to do an assessment of what is not working well. Different individuals will have completely different opinions about what is working well and what is not working well. So for the same reason, again, like in a couple, if you're friends with one of the couple, you will hear the story of them, and you're naturally drawn to say, yeah, they're right. Your partner is not behaving well, whatever. If you hear the other story, then of course it's different. So like in a couple, having someone external who helps them, starting from the awareness side of it, is really important, because by themselves, it's too easy to blame others or to feel guilty, but not think of it as an entity, as the team as an entity. And then you don't have this self-awareness to say, okay, as a team, where do we need to grow? I mean, it means it takes like several very self-aware individuals to be able to have a team who sits around the table and say, okay, as a team, where can we grow? Funny enough, the app that we're developing also helps teams get an idea of where they could grow, even if they don't call a coach or an external agency to help them. Like there are things that you can do, as a team. Well, and we do it also for ourselves. We use these tools ourselves. So we have developed one of the features of our app is that we upload the transcript of a team meeting, and our platform can tell us what dynamics are not working well. And it also tells us the business risk and the emotional impact on the team. It gives us an assessment of the cost of the dysfunction, the cost of doing nothing about it. And it also gives us a couple of rituals, suggests 2 rituals that we could implement in the team to improve. So that is amazing, because it sometimes is brutal, really brutal. We know what this platform does, and we know exactly that we want to hear those hard truths. But at times we do, we always upload the transcripts of our team meetings, and sometimes we hear, okay, we're really not handling it well. Like, I don't know, sales, you guys seem to go after every opportunity without a plan, but for example. Okay, that's an area where we can improve. To do it by yourself is difficult. Even if you're a good leader, to do it all by yourself is difficult because there's so much personal elements involved. And it's a lot easier if you either call someone else to help you at different level of involvement of the someone else, or you can use, again, like a platform that we are developing. But it's difficult to have self-awareness as a team of the areas where you want to improve.
That's good to know that you have a problem, and then also good to know that there are both people and an app that you can call on to help. I like the sound of your app.
Thank you.
I hope people are brave enough to adopt that. I'm sure there's some managers who'd rather not have their transcripts put through a meeting, but they're probably exactly the ones who should have that done.
We know many teams that are actually implementing those rituals. They said, "Oh, look, the advice was very, very on point, and the rituals are very, very useful." So they didn't spend any money, they didn't waste any time, like in long processes, and they already have some practical tools that they are using on Monday at work.
So that tool, it will identify certain issues in a team, shortcomings and so on. And then it does propose some solutions as well, so that you can introduce them. So the outcome of that should be a workplace, presumably, where people feel much more empowered to be able to discuss things. And it leads me on to one of the key things about the book that you wrote, a chapter around radical empathy. To me, that it's such a radical concept. Think of radical empathy. It's not normally two words that people associate together. But, in creating a workspace where that exists, what does that mean to people and to the company?
Radical empathy is a bit like one of our flagship, probably our flagship concept at Wise Humanity. What it means is we always assume everybody's doing always the best they can with the tools they have. This is also neuroscience behind it. So in every moment you're making a decision or you're taking an action, you're doing it because with the tools that you have in your brain, the experience that you have in your brain, and all the inputs, the external inputs that you're receiving in that moment, your brain is making the decision, taking an action because it thinks that it's the best thing to do in that moment. If I assume that you're doing the best you can with the tools you have in every moment, in that moment, if I'm not happy with you, as in my team, for example, I'm your boss, I will not go into a conversation with you or saying you're lazy, you're not doing enough, you don't care enough or whatever. These are all. And by the way, good managers don't do these things, okay? But there's still a lot of leaders who do. But if instead I go into the conversation in a different way and thinking, okay, this is the kind of behavior and the kind of objectives that we're expecting from you. What needs to happen for us as a company or as a team to enable you to do that? And, at some point, the answer could be, you know what, there's nothing you can do. And then you realize that person is not right for your team. Or, I need too much time to be able to do that. Or I need too many resources to be able to do that. And then you realize that person is not right for your team. But the conversation is never about judging you as a person who doesn't care or who's lazy. It's always about, okay, what tools do you need? What does the environment, what does the system need to do? What needs to happen so that you will be able to do these things the way we need them for our team? It's a completely different conversation. So imagine working in a team where these are the conversations.
It's reframing the improvement that someone needs to undergo in kindness.
Yes. So this is what really empathy means. Empathy means understanding that what you do comes from all the experiences that you had in the past. It doesn't come from the evil gene that for some reason is in your DNA and is not in mine. I believe that is not in mine and is in yours. And so there is radical empathy. And that is empathy, practical empathy as well. There's a lot of the people who are against the empathetic leadership always try to say, oh yeah, it means that we need to be nice and kind to everyone. Kind, yes. Nice, not necessarily. But kind, yes. Empathetic leadership doesn't mean saying yes to everything or accepting everything. Absolutely not. But it means to understanding that whatever someone does, there's a reason they do it. And then I can help the system and give that person the tools they need to behave in a different way and do something different at work.
Well, some of these kindness initiatives, like you mentioned, some of them have fallen flat because they've gone too far down the line of looking at the individual. And to the detriment of the team. And there's also a kindness element going, look, we've got customers who are paying us money, who are expecting a service, and we've got the rest of us who have families and mortgages and so on. So kindness means doing right by everyone, but not necessarily being nasty to anyone. Would you say that's a fair thing to say?
Yeah, that's actually a very good way to say it. Not be nasty to everyone. But also, I mean, being kind to everyone doesn't mean that you treat everyone the same. And because then the problem at that point becomes that if you treat all your employees the same, then the most successful or those that are aware that they're bringing more impact, the talent, then they will leave because they don't see a reward. They don't see a reward for themselves, but also they see an unfair behavior towards other people in the team who are not, performing the same good way for the company. And then you lose them. You lose your best talent. One of the objectives that we have is to make sure everybody is able to express their best talent. Create teams where everybody is expressing their best talent.
Amazing. If people wanted to get in touch with you to know more about you, your business, or your app, or your book, what resources could you point them to?
Well, my email, Davide with an E on the end, the Italian one, davide@wisehumanity.com. Wisehumanity.com is our website. There's two things that we do. The platform that we're building, Shubi, that looks a bit like this. Shubi is the name of this Sherpa-like character. And then the other thing we do is called Accelerators. It's called Team Accelerators. And those are the programs, workshops, assessment, report and workshops, measurement that we do to propel a team's performance.
And you have some retreats as well, or are those for special guests only?
They are special guests, as in we give priorities to. So we have a community of clients. So if you work with Wise Humanity, then you can join our community of clients. And every year we run 1 or 2 retreats with them. Always one in Europe, sometimes also one in the US. Because actually the majority of our clients are from the US. UK is the second country. And when we have some rooms left, we also open them to the subscribers of our newsletters. So the next one is in Sicily at the end of April. And actually it's about accountability and living in the paradox between living in a world where we don't, with events that we don't control and still fully own who we are, our behaviors and our decisions. So taking full responsibility of who we are, how we act. So this is against other behaviors like of blaming, feeling guilty, or procrastinating. So dropping all of them, taking responsibility of our actions, even if we live in a world where we have zero control over the things around us. We have one room left.
One room left. Jump quickly. David, work is such an immense part of our lives. And I think the gift to be able to give someone and a team the ability to feel good about their work, and also for the team as a whole to function much better, for the company to function much more effectively. It serves their customers, it serves their individuals, the people who depend on that. And I think that's a real gift that you give to people. So thank you for that. And
thank
anyone,
you very much.
If you wanted to get in touch with David, we'll pop the links below. And David, thank you again.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone.